Today we are diving into a conversation between Tucker Carlson, the former Fox News host who left the network after they settled a massive lawsuit for his non-stop lying about the 2020 election, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., nephew of President John F. Kennedy and son of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. RFK Jr. was once a respected environmental lawyer, but he rebranded himself as a crusader against vaccines and public health institutions, running Children's Health Defense, an organisation that became a fire hose of anti-vaccine talking points. Now, in what can only be described as one of the most bewildering appointments in American history, this same man, who spent decades attacking the very agencies he now oversees, has been confirmed as America's Secretary of Health and Human Services under Donald Trump. The fox is literally guarding the hen house. In this episode, he serves up a buffet of conspiracies to Carlson's eager audience. We are talking about secret CDC studies, corrupt pediatricians, assassination plots, and of course a grand unified theory of everything being a plot to get you. Let's start with the philosophical foundation for all of this. The core idea that you, the listener, should reject anyone with a PhD next to their name. RFK Jr. argues that the very concept of trusting experts is not just wrong, it is a feature of the world's most evil ideologies.
People, we need to stop trusting the experts, right? We were told at the beginning of COVID, don't look at any data yourself, don't do any investigation yourself, just trust the experts. And trusting the experts is not a feature of science. It's not a feature of democracy. It's a feature of religion, and it's a feature of totalitarianism.
This is a beautiful little rhetorical trick. He creates a straw man where trusting experts means blind obedience. That is not how science or democracy works. We rely on experts to interpret complex data. We do not just take their word for it. We look at the consensus among thousands of experts. Equating scientific consensus with totalitarianism is designed to make you feel smart for rejecting knowledge. It is a permission slip to dismiss anything that contradicts your worldview. It is the perfect setup for a guy about to sell you a mountain of nonsense. Now that we have established that experts are bad, let's get to the central lie of the anti-vaccine movement. RFK Jr. claims that childhood vaccines have never been properly tested. He says they have never been studied against a real placebo. This is a big one. If it were true, it would be a scandal. It is not true.
We went from 11, remember, to 69 to 92. 11 vaccines in 86. And not one of them had, except for COVID. COVID is the only one that had a pre-licensing safety trial that involved a placebo, a true placebo. And so all of those other vaccines were ushered in without safety studies. And that means nobody understands the risk profile of those products.
How can you do that?
This is demonstrably false. It is a zombie lie that just will not die. Every vaccine is subjected to rigorous safety trials before licensure. Some are tested against a saline placebo. For others, it would be unethical to leave a control group unprotected against a dangerous disease. So, a new vaccine might be tested against an older approved vaccine. This is a standard and scientifically valid practice. To say they were ushered in without safety studies is a complete fabrication. It is designed to make you believe the entire childhood vaccine schedule is a giant uncontrolled experiment. It is not. So if vaccines are untested, what are the consequences? According to RFK Jr., it is an absolute catastrophe. He unleashes what is known as a Gish Gallop. He rapidly lists dozens of childhood ailments and blames them all on vaccines. The goal is to overwhelm you with so many claims that you cannot possibly fact-check them all.
Vaccines is one of the key culprits. And if you look at all of these diseases that have become epidemic, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, all of these seizure disorders, the neurological disorders like ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, autism, all the diseases you and I never saw when we were kids.
No.
And suddenly this generation is damaged, is incredibly damaged by all these diseases. The autoimmune diseases like diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, the allergic diseases like peanut allergies, anaphylaxis, eczema. Did you ever know anybody with eczema?
No.
Right. So, and now it's ubiquitous in every classroom. And all of those injuries are listed as side effects on the manufacturer's inserts of those products.
Did you catch all that? It is a classic correlation causation fallacy. Yes, we diagnose more of these conditions now. That is because we are better at looking for them. Diagnostic criteria have expanded, public awareness has increased. To just throw them all in a bucket and label it vaccine injury is profoundly irresponsible. And that last part about manufacturer inserts. Those inserts list any adverse event reported during clinical trials, regardless of whether it was caused by the vaccine. If someone got a vaccine and was struck by lightning a week later, the insert might have to list lightning strike. It does not prove causation. Now we get to the conspiracy part. If vaccines are so dangerous, why has no one proven it? Well, according to RFK Jr. they did. He claims the CDC found a study showing an absolutely mind-blowing risk of autism. But then they buried it.
And they found an 1,135% elevated risk of autism among the vaccinated children. And it shocked them. They kept the study secret, and then they manipulated it through 5 different iterations to try to bury the link. And, we know how they did it. They got rid of all the older children, essentially, and just had younger children who were too young to be diagnosed.
An 11,000% risk. Let me say that number again. 11,000% elevated risk of autism among the vaccinated children. That sounds terrifying. It is also complete nonsense. This refers to a gross distortion of the 2004 DeStefano study. The researchers looked at many different subgroups. In one very small subgroup of African American boys, they found a correlation. It was not statistically significant. The overall study found no link between the MMR vaccine and autism. This is not a secret buried study. It is a publicly available paper that has been twisted into a conspiracy theory. The idea that they got rid of older children is a fabrication to explain away why the final paper did not show what he wants it to show. Let's stick with the vaccine and autism link. RFK Jr. insists this link has not been debunked. He does this by creating a very narrow goalpost. He claims scientists only ever looked at one vaccine and one ingredient. Therefore, they cannot say anything about all the other vaccines.
There were more injuries reported from VAERS by the COVID vaccine than all other vaccines put together for the past 36 years. And I'll tell you something else. There's a lot of people out there who say, this is part of the consensus. You'll see this on every mainstream. Anderson, Cooper, Jake, Tapper, all of these guys say again and again that the link between autism and vaccines has been debunked, right? It's been studied. But those studies that I was talking about earlier, the epidemiological studies, they only looked at one vaccine, the MMR, and one ingredient, thimerosal. None of the vaccines that are administered to children during the first 6 months of life have ever been studied for autism.
First, the VAERS data. The Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System is a passive surveillance system. Anyone can report anything. It does not imply causation. During the pandemic, hundreds of millions of people got a vaccine in a short time. Of course, reports went up. It is a statistical inevitability. Second, his claim about the studies is just plain wrong. Dozens of studies have looked at different vaccines, different ingredients, and the entire vaccine schedule. They have consistently found no link to autism. By pretending only MMR and thimerosal were studied, he can keep the question alive forever. It is a classic straw man argument. So if VAERS is not reliable, what should we use? RFK Jr. has a story for that too. He claims the CDC actually developed a much better system, but when that system showed a shockingly high injury rate, they shut it down immediately. Another cover-up.
And they said that VAERS was capturing fewer than 1% of vaccine injuries. And they had a system now that would capture over 95%. And they were very proud, and they brought it to CDC and said, our system works, here's the data. The data showed injuries in about 2.7% of vaccines.
Of all vaccines?
Yeah, all vaccines, about 2.7%.
Wow.
Which I think is something like 1 out of every 37 vaccines you get, there's an injury. And CDC saw that and said, we're not going to use the system.
This is the Lazarus report story. It is another greatest hit of the anti-vaccine movement. The report was from a pilot project. It was testing if an automated system could scan medical records for potential adverse events. The 2.7% figure was not confirmed injuries. It was potential signals that required further investigation. The system had a high rate of false positives. The CDC did not shelve it because it worked too well. They continued to develop better safety monitoring systems like the vaccine safety data link. This story twists a pilot study into a sinister plot. Let's look at a specific vaccine, the hepatitis B shot given to newborns. RFK Jr. questions why this is necessary. He does so by mischaracterizing how the virus spreads and using some pretty stigmatizing language in the process.
You get through sexual transmission, or you get it from sharing needles, and particularly it was prevalent among promiscuous gay men. But a one-day-old baby has the risk to a one-day-old baby was 1 in 7 million.
Very few of whom are promiscuous.
Very few of whom are, involved in prostitution or drug addiction. So, but it was they were all financial drivers.
This is just medically wrong. And frankly, it is gross. The primary reason newborns get the hepatitis B vaccine is to prevent mother-to-child transmission at birth. A mother can have hepatitis B and not know it. If the baby gets infected, it can lead to lifelong liver disease or cancer. The vaccine is a crucial safety net. It has nothing to do with whether the baby is a drug addict. Framing it this way is a cheap emotional ploy. It uses homophobic and stigmatizing tropes to undermine a critical public health measure. Now let's pivot to the COVID-19 vaccines. RFK Jr. claims the Pfizer clinical trial data showed something shocking. He says more people died in the vaccine group than in the placebo group, making the vaccine more dangerous than the virus.
In fact, the Pfizer vaccine, when it came out, it had a higher all-cause mortality, so more people died in the placebo group. More people died in the vaccine group than in the placebo group. I had 20,000 people who got the vaccine, 20,000 who didn't. And after 6 months, they looked at it, and there was 23% more deaths in the vaccinated group from all causes than in the placebo group.
This is one of the most dangerous and dishonest claims about the COVID vaccines. During the initial 6-month blinded trial, there were 15 deaths in the vaccine group and 14 in the placebo group. This difference is statistically meaningless in a group of 40,000 people. Crucially, none of the deaths in the vaccine group were attributed to the vaccine. After the trial was unblinded, many in the placebo group got the vaccine. In the follow-up period, there were significantly more deaths among those who originally received the placebo. He is cherry-picking a tiny meaningless number to paint a completely false picture. Continuing on this theme, he then attacks the vaccine's efficacy. He used the same trial data to argue that the vaccine was basically useless and that the public was duped by misleading statistics.
Well, that's why they were saying it, because there was two is 100% of one, right? 100% larger than one. But that's what they had. But they were telling the American people, it's 100% effective. And that, when people heard that, they thought, if you get the vaccine, you can't get COVID, which of course now everybody realizes was wrong, because everybody got COVID, whether they got the vaccine or not. And, what they really should have been telling people is that in order to prevent one death from COVID, you had to give 19,999 vaccines.
This is a masterclass in statistical manipulation. The initial efficacy numbers were about preventing symptomatic infection, not just death. The vaccine was highly effective at that. His number needed to treat calculation is absurd. He takes the number of deaths from the short initial trial period and extrapolates it, as if that is the only benefit. The vaccine's primary benefit was preventing severe disease hospitalization and death over time, not just in a 6-month trial window. He's using misleading math to make a life-saving intervention sound worthless. So when Tucker Carlson asked him the big question, did the vaccine kill more people than it saved? RFK Jr. dodges. He says he cannot possibly know. Why? Because of a massive government cover-up, of course.
And the reason I don't know is because the studies that were done by my agency were substandard, and they were not designed to answer that question. And there's been a lot of obfuscation about covering up, as you know, about suppressing any kind of discussion of vaccine injuries. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg publicly said that he was ordered by the White House to suppress anybody on his platform, on Facebook or Instagram, who mentioned vaccine injuries.
RFK Jr. makes definitive claims about cover-ups and censorship while using "I don't know" as protective cover. Notice what he presents as established facts. The studies were substandard. There's been obfuscation, and the White House ordered Facebook to suppress vaccine injury discussions. He's not expressing genuine scientific uncertainty. He's promoting specific conspiracy theories while positioning himself as the reasonable person who would give you straight answers if only the shadowy forces weren't preventing the truth from emerging. This allows him to seed doubt about vaccines and government institutions without taking full responsibility for those claims. It's a form of conspiracy entrepreneurship. He gets to spread fear and distrust while maintaining the pose of someone who's simply being appropriately cautious about what he claims to know. The "I can't know because they won't let us know" framing is both his evidence and his shield, making it nearly impossible to counter because any defense of the institutions becomes proof of the conspiracy itself. On the topic of censorship, RFK Jr. claims the White House had to invent a whole new word to justify censoring his factually true posts. The word is malinformation, and he says it is a purely Orwellian tool of the state.
And, but they were, it was not, it wasn't misinformation. The word, in fact, they had to invent a new word, which is because Facebook was saying to the White House, this isn't misinformation, it's actually true. And the White House said, well, it's malinformation. Malinformation, this is an Orwellian kind of construct. And, malinformation is information that is factually true, but it is nevertheless inconvenient for the government.
This is a fantastic victim narrative, but it is not quite right. The term malinformation was not invented by the White House to get him. It has been used by disinformation researchers for years. It describes genuine information that is shared out of context to mislead or cause harm. For example, sharing a video of a protest from 5 years ago and claiming it happened yesterday. The facts in the video are true. The context is false. He is framing a standard piece of terminology as a bespoke conspiracy against him. It makes him sound like a brave truth-teller being silenced by an evil empire. So far, we have heard that the CDC is corrupt. The White House is corrupt. What about the very bedrock of science? The peer-reviewed journals, you guessed it. They are corrupt too. RFK Jr. claims they are nothing more than propaganda vessels for big pharma.
And also the journals won't publish anything that is critical of vaccines. So they won't do it because there's so much pressure on them. They're funded by the pharmaceutical companies, and they'll lose advertising. They'll lose revenue from reprints if they don't do that. So even Marcia Engel, who is the long time, I think 25 years at the New England Journal of Medicine, she said, you can't believe anything that's in the scientific journals anymore. Richard Horton, who's the longtime editor of The Lancet, is the same thing. He says, we've become propaganda vessels for the pharmaceutical companies.
This is another case of taking legitimate criticism and twisting it into a grand conspiracy. Yes, there are valid concerns about pharmaceutical industry influence in medical research. Dr. Marcia Angel and Dr. Richard Horton have written about this, but they were calling for reform and transparency, not for the public to dismiss all of science. RFK Jr. takes their nuanced critiques and uses them as a cudgel to claim the entire system is rotten to the core. It is a gross misrepresentation of their work, and it serves his narrative that no institution can be trusted. The conspiracy web expands. It is not just the journals and the advisory boards, it is your friendly neighborhood pediatrician. RFK Jr. alleges that doctors are essentially bribed by insurance companies to vaccinate your kids, and that they will kick you out of their practice if you threaten their bonus.
There's a published article out there now that says that 50% of revenues to most pediatricians come from vaccines. And then there's a whole structure where Blue Cross and the other insurance companies pay bonuses to the pediatrician to make sure, if, for example, 95% of if their clients are fully vaccinated, they get a huge bonus. It could be tens of thousands of dollars. And that's why your pediatrician, if you say, I want to go slow on the vaccines or I want to have a little different schedule, your pediatrician will throw you out of his practice because you're now jeopardizing that bonus structure.
This is another distortion of a real practice. Some insurance plans do offer performance-based incentives to doctors for meeting public health goals. This can include high vaccination rates, but it also includes things like cancer screenings and diabetes management. It is part of a shift towards preventative care. To frame this as a bribe is deeply cynical, and the idea that a doctor would throw a family out of their practice over one person potentially affecting a bonus is absurd. Doctors may dismiss patients who refuse all vaccines because it puts other vulnerable patients in their waiting room at risk, not because of a bonus. At this point, why not just go for the whole enchilada? RFK Jr. zooms out to claim the entire healthcare system is designed to keep you sick, not through any specific plan, he says. It is just a system of perverse incentives.
And the whole system, as you know, it's just a bundle of perverse incentives that where everybody is making money by keeping us sick. And I'm not saying that's deliberate or purposeful or planned in any way. It's just the incentive system that everybody makes money. The insurance companies make money if you're sick. Ironically, they make more money if the population is sick.
He says it is not planned or purposeful, but that is exactly what he is implying. This is a grand conspiracy theory that paints every single person in healthcare as a profiteer of misery. The US healthcare system has massive problems. No one disputes that. But to claim that insurance companies make more money when people are sick is just fundamentally wrong. Their business model relies on collecting premiums from healthy people who do not use expensive services. This kind of sweeping generalization is designed to make you feel hopeless and distrustful of any medical advice. Okay, let's take a sharp turn from medical conspiracies to geopolitical ones. RFK Jr. accuses Dr. Anthony Fauci of not only funding the creation of COVID-19, but also of giving the Chinese a special technology to hide their tracks.
I think he had a lot of liability on creating coronavirus. He was funding precisely that research at the Wuhan lab.
Yep.
And he was giving them the technology. He was giving them, he gave them not only the technology, the precise technology for developing that pathogen, and published about it, by the way. And the publications credit NIH for financing the studies, but he also gave them, one of his fundees, Ralph Barrick from the University of North Carolina, developed a technique called the seamless ligation technique, which is a technique for hiding the laboratory origins of a virus, of a manipulated virus.
This is pure conspiracy fuel. The NIH did fund research on coronaviruses. That is true. But it was basic research to understand and prevent future pandemics, not to create one. The seamless ligation technique he mentions is a standard genetic engineering tool. It is not some secret technology for hiding evidence. It is used in labs all over the world for all kinds of research. He is describing routine scientific practice in the most sinister way possible, to make it sound like Fauci was personally equipping a foreign lab to build a secret bioweapon. And here's the follow-up. Tucker Carlson jumps in to help frame this research not as public health, but as biowarfare, and RFK Jr. agrees. Why else would you give this technology to the Chinese?
And it was a way of hiding evidence of human tampering. What is the public health rationale? If you were interested in public health, you would want to be doing the inverse of that. You would want to be pinning red flags all to it and say this was created by people.
That's what you would do if you were creating viruses for biological warfare.
Right, that's right. And that's another question, is why would he give it to the Chinese?
And there it is. The quiet part, out loud. They are explicitly framing public health research as bioweapons development and implying that a top US official gave this capability to a foreign adversary. This is an incredibly serious and baseless accusation. International scientific collaboration is normal. It is how science advances. But here it is painted as treason. This is how you turn a public health figure into a villain in a spy movie. If you think the conspiracies are limited to science and medicine, you are mistaken. We are now entering the historical portion of our program. RFK Jr. states that it is a settled fact that his uncle John F. Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy, and that the official report was a lie.
I don't think anybody who actually is willing to read the evidence now will question the fact that my uncle was killed by a conspiracy. And that, in fact, Congress in 1973, when the Church Committee looked at I think it was 73. The
25,
Church,
yeah.
What, 75?
Yep.
Church Committee, they said it was conspiracy. That was the conclusion of the Congressional Committee. So the Warren Committee that was run by Alan Dulles, who was, had a lot of reasons to lie and did lie throughout.
The JFK assassination is the mother of all American conspiracy theories, and RFK Jr. presents it as case closed. He dismisses the Warren Commission with an ad hominem attack on Alan Dulles, and he misrepresents the findings of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. That committee concluded there was probably a conspiracy based on disputed acoustic evidence. They did not definitively prove one. He presents his personal belief and family history as unassailable fact, undermining the official historical record in the process. What's particularly concerning is how RFK Jr. weaponizes his family connection to lend credibility to these claims. By invoking his uncle's death, he transforms speculation into seemingly authoritative testimony. This rhetorical strategy makes it difficult for listeners to critically evaluate the evidence without appearing to dismiss a grieving family member's perspective. The acoustic evidence he relies on has been extensively debated and challenged by subsequent investigations. The National Academy of Sciences later questioned the committee's acoustic analysis, suggesting the sounds identified as gunshots may have been recorded after the assassination. Yet RFK Jr. glosses over these complications, presenting a complex and contested historical question as settled science. This pattern of cherry-picking at evidence while claiming absolute certainty becomes deeply problematic when applied to other conspiracy theories. It establishes a framework where official investigations are inherently suspect, alternative theories are treated as fact, and personal conviction trumps rigorous analysis. The JFK assassination serves as a gateway drug to broader conspiratorial thinking, where questioning authority becomes conflated with accepting any alternative narrative, regardless of its evidentiary foundation. Next up is the assassination of his own father, Robert F. Kennedy. Here he details a theory of a second gunman, citing autopsy evidence that he claims proves the convicted shooter, Sirhan Sirhan, could not have fired the fatal shots.
And my father was shot by 4 shots from behind. One of them passed harmlessly through the shoulder pad of his, this is what Noguchi's autopsy said, through the shoulder pad of his suit. And all the others were contact shots, meaning the barrel of the gun was either touching his body or less than 3 inches from his body. The last shot that killed him was behind his left ear. And that shot, Noguchi says, was from 1 to 3 inches from him. And Sirhan was never behind him.
This is a compelling story, especially coming from the victim's son. The details about the autopsy from Dr. Thomas Noguchi are central to most RFK assassination theories. However, eyewitness accounts from that chaotic night are conflicting, and no second gunman has ever been definitively identified. He's presenting one interpretation of the evidence as the only possible one, and it is an argument based on cherry-picking specific details while ignoring others that contradict the second gunman theory. Finally, to complete the conspiracy, it was not just a second gunman, it was a cover-up by law enforcement. RFK Jr. accuses the Los Angeles Police Department of intentionally destroying thousands of crime scene photos to hide the truth.
He pushed my father off him and he had a gun drawn. And the gun was not taken away from him by the LAPD, which did a terrible job. And, not only a terrible, but a malevolent job, because they destroyed 2,500 photographs that were taken that night before the trial. So there were photographs, 2,500 photographs in that kitchen and the ballroom. And the LAPD collected them and destroyed them all. And you have to ask, why would they do that?
And there is the final piece of the puzzle, a cover-up. The claim about the destroyed photographs is true. The LAPD did destroy crime scene photos. Their official reason was to prevent them from being published and causing distress to the Kennedy family. Conspiracy theorists argue it was to hide evidence of a second shooter. By presenting only the sinister interpretation, RFK Jr. turns a questionable decision by the LAPD into proof of a deep state plot. But the full context matters. The LAPD's destruction of photographs occurred in 1988, 20 years after the assassination, following a court order related to a civil lawsuit. The department claimed they were disposing of duplicate images and graphic crime scene photos that served no investigative purpose while retaining key evidence. This decision, while certainly problematic from a transparency standpoint, came after multiple investigations had already concluded. The timing alone undermines the conspiracy narrative. If the LAPD were orchestrating a cover-up in 1968, why wait 2 decades to destroy evidence? Why retain other crucial ballistic and physical evidence while destroying photographs? The more mundane explanation, bureaucratic procedure combined with a misguided attempt to protect the family's privacy, lacks the dramatic appeal of a conspiracy but fits the established facts far better. RFK Jr.'s presentation transforms this administrative decision into smoking gun evidence of malevolent intent. He ignores the procedural context, the 20-year delay, and the retention of other evidence. Instead, he poses the rhetorical question, why would they do that? Implying only sinister motives could explain the action. This rhetorical sleight of hand is classic conspiracy thinking. Take a questionable but explicable decision, strip away context, and present it as proof of a grand plot. It fits perfectly into his overarching narrative. Nothing is as it seems, and every official institution is lying to you. The destruction of photographs becomes not just evidence of incompetence or poor judgment, but proof of a coordinated deception spanning decades and multiple agencies. So what have we learned? We have learned that if you want to build a universe of conspiracy, you need a few key ingredients. First, you must insist that all experts are liars. Second, you must claim that every institution from the CDC to your local doctor's office is corrupt. Third, you must present cherry-picked data and out-of-context quotes as smoking gun evidence. And finally, you must frame yourself as the lone, brave voice willing to speak the forbidden truth. It is a powerful formula. It is also a deeply corrosive one. It does not just ask you to question one thing, it asks you to distrust everything. And now this man, who spent decades undermining trust in vaccines, spreading medical misinformation and attacking the very foundations of public health, is in charge of America's health agencies. He shouldn't be in charge of a McDonald's, let alone a government agency. The consequences will be measured in lives lost. Children who go unvaccinated because their parents believed his lies. Disease outbreaks that could have been prevented. Scientific research that gets derailed by conspiracy theories. This is not a thought experiment anymore. This is not just another podcast controversy. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. now has the power to turn his dangerous fantasies into government policy. And that should terrify anyone who cares about public health in America. I'm sorry to end on such a horrible note, but this man is genuinely dangerous. It's a sick joke that he's in the position he's in, and an even sicker joke that somehow people support him. There will be books written about this period of history, and they won't be kind.